Good afternoon, ladies, and welcome to Mentor Monday. I'm Kira Reed, CEO of Caden Academy and Marker Digital. I hope that you are getting your week off to a good start. Hope you had a great and restful weekend, ready to kick some butt this week at work. Today, we're really thrilled to have Renie Ritchie. She is an insurance expert, and she's going to be talking with us today about workman's comp, general liability, and product liability. And we're really going to go over what are the risks of not having insurance and what are the rewards in investing in insurance. In this industry, it is absolutely critical that you get yourself covered. And if we have seen how quickly the elements of life can take away everything that you've invested so hard to build, we just have to take a look at how many farmers lost their harvest in these tragic fires we had here in Northern California a few weeks ago. So we're going to be digging into insurance today with Renie Ritchie. Welcome back, Jamie. Today is the second broadcast we've had in quite a while together. So I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. How are things going in Michigan?
They're going, we're moving forward. Insurance is a hot topic here in Michigan as we are transitioning into a regulatory program. We've had medical marijuana since 2008, and starting December 15th, our state starts taking applications for licensed cannabis businesses, and hopefully we'll see legal licensed cannabis businesses in Michigan mid next year. And so everyone's working really hard preparing for that, including myself. I'm seeking a provisioning center license, and this week I get to pitch our dispensary concept to the Michigan Women's Foundation, and they actually chose us to pitch, and so it's kind of exciting times around here.
Congratulations. We're really rooting for you. We're very excited to see what happens. So keep us posted.
Thank you very much.
Really exciting.
Okay, so today I want to give a big thank you to Caden Academy and the Caden Academy team for really making this show possible. Ladies, if you are launching a business and you need help getting that off the ground, you need to really understand what kinds of things you need to have in place legally, financially, when it comes to your marketing. Caden and our incredibly seasoned industry veterans who are our mentors have a lot to teach you about how to build a successful business and a compliant business. So our courses cover everything from legal to financial to activism. How do you actually become active in your local community? Jamie fills us in on what's going on in Michigan because she is on the ground there as an activist. So she is able to actually affect policy because she knows how to go in and participate with her city council. So if you want to learn how to do this, Caden Academy is definitely the place for you to learn how to do this in addition to these other things I mentioned. So hurry and sign up over there, cadenacademy.com, or shoot us an email if you've got any questions. We're happy to talk to you about it. Okay. So quick reminder before we begin, if you have questions for Renie, which I really hope you do, please put it in the comments. If there's anything you want her to know during our broadcast, Jamie will definitely be letting us know. If there's anything there that needs to be related, ask questions. If you don't have questions about insurance, you're not paying attention. So listen up. All right. Renie Ritchie, so excited to have you here. You and I have been talking for a while about the needs of insurance in this industry and also the misconceptions. A lot of people believe they can't even purchase insurance to protect things like their crops. So I'm going to let you take it away. Tell us about who you are, how you got involved in insurance, and then we'll dive into our conversation about it.
Well, thank you. And it's nice to finally participate on a bigger level with your group. And again, just quick kudos to everything that you're doing to bring us all together. Good job. Keep up the good work. It's only going to get bigger and better. So my background is I've always been a small business owner. I was never in the world of cannabis. I was actually in sports, but my introduction to cannabis, for anybody that either has followed anything with the NFL or has a husband, a boyfriend, or the like, I had a client, and he was quite a notable NFL player. His name was Ricky Williams with the Miami Dolphins. And Ricky was he was the first NFL player to be suspended for testing positive and so on and so forth. So that's how I really I mean, it was, everything was marijuana. It was just, back in the day, it was so taboo and it was such a negative. So
what year did that happen? I'm not a sports fan, so I don't know when that
Ricky
was.
was about 10, it's been over 10 years. And if you Google Ricky Williams, you can look it up, you'll see it. And, it pretty much derailed his career, friendships and stuff, but he's always stood his ground. And most recently, in the past couple of years, he's kind of come out of the shadows, if you will, really talking about it with some of these other players. But Ricky was the first NFL player to really get on the map. So, I was always around it. And then coincidentally, as I was kind of winding down my life in sports, and that's a whole nother animal, and trying to figure out what to do. My brother owned an insurance agency, and I always had my licenses because I always referred people. And I don't know, there's just a real practical side to me when running a business. How do you protect yourself? What are the basics of running a business? So all this combined with the fact that my significant other in my life retired actually from a high school district and owned some properties in Northern California and became a grower himself. So all these things started lining up, the stars, the moon, and a couple of years ago started looking around thinking, they're all trying to run a business. Everybody's running a business. Everybody's putting a ton of money into this, but what are we doing to protect ourselves? What are we doing to protect the workers? What are we doing to protect the general liability? What are we doing? So I just kind of made a, mid life change to commit myself to insuring the cannabis industry. Of course I can insure anything, but I saw the demand, and more importantly, I saw, entrepreneurs, small business owners, so many people that are in our group, not knowing what to do, how to do it. And let's face it, insurance isn't a very sexy subject matter. And, you always associate kind of maybe yucky salespeople with insurance. And I think, the difference, I think, hopefully with myself is, I've been the small business owner. I've been taken advantage of. I've overpaid. I've been underinsured. But as it relates to cannabis, it's in my world. My day-to-day, I can see the life of a grower. I participate in it, and it's part of our livelihood. So really my goal has been to dive in, understand it, make sure that we have the best markets, and just to steer people in the right direction. Because people are, you're putting your whole livelihood, your heart and your soul into these business setups. So let's do it the right way. So for example, I'm based in San Diego. I'm licensed in all 50 states. And just kind of a real basic, the very first question I get from most people is, if it's against the law federally, how can it be? Why can I insure it? How can I insure it? So the way that insurance works is it's not about the federal laws. First of all, it's about the state. So whatever state you're in, it's how it's recognized by the state. And then from that level, it's the carriers. So for example, one of the biggest carriers in the cannabis business, which will shock people, is Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett. That's a pretty big sign when Warren Buffett throws his hat in the ring. So really, the carrier has to be approved to be doing business in that state, which of course they all are. And then insurance is a private instrument. It's between, myself and the carrier. It's a contract. So it's up to the carrier to say, yeah, I'll insure the risk. So that's the basic with it. Forget the federal stuff. And then we go into the cannabis itself. So most insurance instruments, documents, always have exclusions that say, you can't break federal laws, or you can't break this, you can't break that law. And you see time and time again where people have been taken advantage of in the cannabis business that have gotten those kind of policies.
So basically, give me your insurance, pay me to insure you. We both know that it's federally illegal. And since I have that in the bylines of my insurance, you're basically giving me money for something I don't have to insure you for.
Right.
What a scam.
It's been a big scam. So these policies, and there's only a handful of carriers right now that insure it, but these policies, our policies, are specifically written to address cannabis. They know what the risk is. There's no secrets. So cannabis coverage has to be, insurance coverage altogether has to be underwritten. So we deal with carriers that have language for cannabis. There are some exclusions where, if you're talking about a grow, you can't grow outdoors, and, you can't have mites and bugs and all that kind of stuff. But the language is very specific, and the underwriters know what they're doing. There's no cheating the system. There's always somebody that's going to try to get around it. But the more you disclose to them, the better it gets. So the more straightforward you are, and they'll work, it's kind of a case by case by case by case. I personally work with an underwriter out of Colorado, and he's terrific because he's in Colorado and they're so far ahead of everybody that he's kind of seen everything. But I mean, I will tell you guys that probably on a weekly basis, I take what we call a case to him that's so different from the next guy, and they go, and they'll come back with 20 different questions, and yeah, they'll do this or tweak that, and 99.9% of the time they write it. So the carriers like cannabis because right now in the world of cannabis, there's not a lot of claims. So it's a good risk. So they see cannabis as being highly regulated, highly secured. That's a big part of it. And minimal claims. You don't see people filing claims. So to kind of get to the nuts and bolts of running a business, for example, no matter what state you're in, to run a business and have employees, you must have work comp. I mean, you have to. Anybody that says we want to get around it, or we're not going to do this, or we're not going to do that, why in the world would you ever want to do that? First of all, it's illegal. But the second thing is, like, for example, in the state of California is so proactive. The Department of Insurance wants the cannabis industry to be successful. So what you don't want is you don't want to have a dispensary or a grow with employees, have somebody walk in from the state, question your work comp, and then you go, I don't have it, and they'll shut you down on the spot. We don't want to give people another opportunity to shut us down. So again, I'm just going to use the state of California because most states, everybody's kind of falling in line, but with our work comp, for example, we have categories now for everything that you can imagine: growers, trimmers. They call trimmers horticultural manicurists. I mean, so there's a category for everything. But you have to make sure that your employees are covered. A big thing in our industry, and I think I've even seen maybe some postings about it, is, again, everybody's trying to circumvent the system. So everybody says, well, I don't really have employees. They're 1099 contractors. Well, you guys, that's probably your biggest mistake. The IRS will come in and tear somebody apart. So again, another example is, let's say you're a grow facility and you do have 20 people working there, but they all say, well, we're 1099 employees. Therefore, I'm the employer and I'm not responsible for you. That one employee, something happens to them, they are going to file a work comp claim. And even though the employer says, well, they're a 1099, guess what? The state and the IRS are going to come back in and say, no, they're not. You're responsible. Oh, you don't have work comp? Well, here are your fines, and here's how we're going to shut you down. So, I mean, we need to be proactive to begin with. I mean, it's business 101. It's also
okay. Let me just stop you because there's a question that I want to ask to kind of clear up before we dive into these three categories we want to talk about. And that is that there's a lot of mistrust of insurance.
Right.
It's overcomplicated. It's a ripoff. There are some scams. How do we position it in this industry that it is actually your friend?
Well, and
that it's something in your toolbox that will actually help you and protect you, as opposed to something that you're forced into having to do and you're going to get ripped off anyway.
Well, and I think to answer that question, I believe it's the messenger. It's my responsibility as an insurance consultant to assure you that you're getting the best product, that the return on your investment is wise, that if there is an accident, you are covered, that this isn't some schemy, slimy, scammy product. I mean, and it really falls on somebody like me because I have to have insurance called errors and omissions. So if I've sold you an insurance product that is null and void, that has been misrepresented, you have an incident, you have a claim, it's not covered. Frankly, the person that they're going to come back to is going to be me. And personally, I'm not willing to risk, my own career, my livelihood, and potentially fines and going to jail for, to sell some bunk insurance. I feel so strongly about the success of cannabis businesses, over and over and over again. I've seen too many people get shot down, and again, I live it. So I know the money that's invested in it. And it's difficult, like you said, with these crops that went up. I'll post some pictures online. We had a rental property that we had a grower, and he got completely wiped out. It's just, and nothing was insured. The property wasn't even insured. He didn't even have coverage on that. So, to kind of just loosely touch on things, and if, again, anybody can always come to me directly, but work comp is going to be critical, and that in more and more states, Michigan, California, Colorado, wherever it becomes legal and you're employing people, you must have work comp, because if you don't, they're going to come in, they're going to shut you down. And I can just promise you it's a nightmare. It's just from the IRS, and that, trust me, the IRS will step in on this level to come after you. So that's the work comp piece. And again, I could spend hours telling people, but for a small expense, you need to insure your hard work and your brand and your assets and everything that you're building. And more importantly, you can't do business without it. You can't do business. So, and this is what I'm trying to do for a lot of other people too, is if you're putting together a business plan, reach out to me and say, hey, this is what I'm looking at. Can you give me a ballpark so we can incorporate it into our business plan? And I'll put together, I've been doing it long enough and I know my states pretty well and kind of my categories and stuff, but, give me a shout, send me an email and say, just give me a ballpark. I'll get some details from you, but give me a ballpark so I can put it in my business plan and we can start budgeting. Because you want to take that insurance expense, as we all know, and you're going to spread that out into the cost of doing business. You're going to build those pennies into your profit margins. That's how you're going to offset that expense. So you've got your work comp, and then you've got
Hold on 1 second, Renie. Let me ask you something quickly on this work comp. So what are 3 things that, let's say I need to go look at getting workman's comp insurance? What are 3 things that I either need to know when I'm getting involved in this, or things that I need to ask my insurance expert to make sure that I'm getting the right coverage for me?
Probably the 3 things that somebody like me, I'm going to say, what is your business? Are you a grower? Are you doing transportation? Are you trimming? Are you manufacturing? Are you a dispensary? Are you retail? So I'm going to ask you what your industry segment is. And then I'm going to ask, give me a job description, so let's see, we're in a dispensary. So that's retail. That's mostly retail business. If you're growing, that's more landscaping and we know how to finesse that. And then the 3rd question is going to be, what do you think your payroll is? Because your work comp, everybody, is going to be based on your payroll. It's just, that's the industry. That's how it works. So if your payroll increases, that means you're doing better, but it means your work comp's going to go up. And you know what? A 4th item is your safety. So remember, with work comp, we want to make sure that you've got good safety in place. You've got good practices in place, that people aren't tripping and falling. And if you're growing I don't know how many people have been to indoor grows and stuff like that, but you've got OSHA regulations that are going to come in and make sure that, well, and your husband can probably speak a little bit to this.
Oh, yes.
But OSHA, we don't want to give anybody any wiggle room to come in and, see, electrical cords or any kind of piping or water lines or anything. We don't want to give employees an opportunity to trip, to fall, to be hurt.
So do you actually go into a company before you insure them and walk through their greenhouse and ensure that all of these things are compliant?
We will. And I'll just give everybody a little side note too. And again, I know Colorado's done it, and some of the other states, and California is a big one too, is that Cal OSHA, all the safety and everything, they're going to be coming into these grows as well. And all these other businesses, people are always going to look for an opportunity to derail us a bit. It's just the nature of what it is. I mean, even though you've got everybody going, oh, we're embracing it, we love it. It's like any other business. Give them a little opportunity, a little bit of wiggle room, and they're gonna come in there and do that. I mean, that's
you get one person on the board who's like, I'm opposed to this cannabis thing, and they'll make their mission to shut it.
I'm going to go out to every single grow, and I'm going to make sure that I'll just give you guys another little scenario is that air quality. Air quality is going to be a big issue. Air quality is going to be a very big issue with OSHA, and that in turn dials in on your work comp. So again, these are all just little things to think about. But if you're growing or you're manufacturing or whatever your circumstances, you have to think about how is it going to affect an employee, and is that employee going to get disgruntled and say, oh, I've got some something in my lungs, some
respiratory disease from the smell of the cannabis in the air.
Something crazy. It's, like hairstylists, when they all started straightening hair, and the next thing you knew, there were all these lawsuits because of the Brazilian blowouts and the chemicals. I'm just telling you, it's a warning, because it's coming. It's all coming. So you have to, that's why just having the basic foundation to, cover your ass, and then you can start piling on stuff. But, some of the things that I do, or my services, are a little different too, because we do offer risk management. So we help with a safety manual, procedures, coordinating people, referrals, all that kind of stuff.
Is that an additional charge to your services, or it's just?
That's who we are. That's what we include. So we have a full risk management program. And
wow.
That, wasn't an easy feat, and there was a lot of arguing involved. And then, so just kind of moving along, just again, broad overviews, we all talk about general liability. So I'll kind of transition, get away from maybe the growers to talk about the dispensaries. Jamie, if you're going to open up a dispensary, right? And you're in Michigan.
Yes.
So I've got some clients in Michigan that are growers, so I'm a dispensary. People are coming in and out of my business, and it's a snowy, cold day, and somebody slips and falls. And so guess what they're going to do? They're going to sue you.
Yeah. I'm quite aware of that situation, because that happened to me 3 years ago. I fell because the drainer, at my apartment complex,
right,
and the gutter was draining water onto the sidewalk. It froze. I fell, shattered my ankle, had to have 9 screws and a plate in, and I sued.
Somebody had to pay for it.
Yeah, and I didn't have insurance at that time, because I had just started a job that week.
Right.
And I had to sue and settled.
Yeah, to get somebody to pay for it. But part of their general liability covered your medical bills. Mm-hmm. So it was a win-win. So their liability, their premium was probably, let's just say $5,000 a year. Well, for $5,000 versus, in the grand scheme of things, what your medical bills were, it's nothing. And it protected everybody, and nobody was wiped out.
Yeah.
But that's going to be a big target too for our business, because again, I think everybody thinks, if you see a leaf, or, you say weed, cannabis, marijuana, whatever you want to call it, that everybody's just a multimillionaire. You're just, cranking the cash, and we're just great targets. Everybody's a good target. Everybody's going to be a big, big, big target. So, the general liability is one of the biggest pieces of the pie.
And so workman's comp, you have to have by law.
As an employer.
As an employer.
Yes.
General liability, do you have to have it, or is it optional?
It's optional, but it would be ridiculous not to have it. And what you're going to find is that most landlords, anybody that you rent property from, is going to require that you've got general liability, some kind of general liability. Again, on my side of the equation, if I didn't talk to you about general liability and try to educate you and try to do something for you, I'm not doing my job. If I'm not letting you know of all the risk and all the exposures, I'm not doing my job.
So what are some of the things that if I'm coming to you looking for general liability, or someone else other than you, what do I need to know or ask?
Your work comp rates are based on your payroll and your classification of your employees. Your general liability is going to be based on your sales, what they've got to have a basis for everything, right? For your premium.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to base it off your sales, and they're going to base it off what the business is. Again, is it retail? Is it growth?
Is it higher risk or lower risk?
And there's a whole, it just goes on and on and on. But that's kind of your thumbnail on general liability. And again, here's what I really want to emphasize to people. Cannabis insurance is not expensive. This business insurance, it's not expensive. Everybody goes nuts and goes, oh my God, it's going to be so expensive. It's not. It's not. It's in line, if not less expensive than traditional business. Again, because there's not a long history of claims. So as long as you keep the claims down and all that good stuff, there's not. That's
good to know. Because I would have thought too that it would be way more expensive.
Well, now there are some programs out there that kind of had the market all locked up, and everybody thought, ooh, I have to go, through these certain people. But now as more and more people jump into this game, like I will tell you again, back to Berkshire Hathaway, they're so competitive that, they want the business. So they are getting lean and mean and really fighting for it. But here's the big one. This is the big doozy that's going to hit for all of us, is product liability.
Okay, number 3, product liability.
Product liability. So here's a great example. I have a client that has a great product that if you get so high, you drink it, and they claim that within 15 to 20 minutes it will bring you down. And everybody loves it.
Who couldn't use that?
Who couldn't use it? So they called me, and they're based out of Washington, and they were just absolutely thrilled because they'd gotten a purchase order from the MGM properties in Vegas to put this product all over. But at the 11th hour, they said, well, where's your product liability? We have to have proof of product liability. And they went, what? So, we scrambled, and fortunately, it's a great product. Labeling had been done, well, all that good stuff. So we were able to insure it. But I probably do more product liability than anything, because remember this, if you're ingesting something, just keep thinking that. If you're ingesting something just like peanut butter, milk, eggs, or whatever, and a consumer has a reaction or something funky happens, first thing they're going to do is double back to the product, to the edible, to whomever, where it came from. So product liability and being able to recall the product is a really big deal.
So,
I would imagine that would be, sorry, go ahead, Jamie.
Is the product maker mostly responsible, or does the dispensary hold any responsibility for that? Like maybe lack of education or something?
Well, that's going to turn into some of the dicier things, but not really. It's really about the manufacturer. Where did it start? What's in the product? Because that's going to be the chain of when somebody goes back on a product. My personal opinion and comment to everybody is, on a side note, when you're setting up your entities, be careful how you set things up. Try to set something up as a corporation to protect yourselves. That's a whole nother conversation for, your legal crew. But between your legal structure and how you're insured, the overall goal is to provide protection. 100%. We need to protect, and I say it over and over again, the brand and the assets, your reputation, all those kinds of things. So the product liability is just going to be huge. And again, it's not expensive. So, why not insure? It's just peace of mind. If something, who knows what can happen? And again, we're going to see it over and over and over again where, kids get their hands on something, or the dog, or whatever. You get creative attorneys, and the sky's the limit.
It's interesting that at this point, it's not that expensive, because just even in the examples that you brought up just now, the dog gets it, the kid gets it. Where does that line of responsibility get drawn, where it's the product's fault, or it's the consumer's fault, or it's the dispensary's fault? Or how does that line get drawn back to the manufacturer when it was your fault for leaving it out for your kid to get into?
But that's the $1 million question with any potential lawsuit, right? So again, what's the whole goal is to insure yourself against that kind of risk. We'd all like to believe, I think that, and again, we see this in our group, every day or whatever. Everybody's excited. Everybody's got products. It's exciting when somebody sells a dozen of their cookies that they put their heart and soul into, or their chocolate and all this cool stuff. I love it. I mean, I'm excited for everybody, but the sensible person in the back of my brain goes, okay, but let's make sure that you're totally protected, because you know what, honestly, as much as we want to trust everybody, you can't. You can't. You have to be smart about it. It's like you've got to take a big deep breath and go, okay, I got to be prepared for it. So
it's almost easier to trust when you know that your ass is covered.
Cover your ass. I mean, it's just as simple as covering your ass. But, and we can dive into all the different kinds of insurances, but I'll give you guys another example. I've got a big grower up in Riverside County, and they put $1 million into equipment and renovations. And to cover that property was, I don't know, say $3,500 or $4,000. It wasn't.
Holy cow, are you serious?
And they kind of kept dragging their feet. And I said, let's look at it like this. Let's just say somebody comes in and steals all your lighting, or whatever happens. Then it's that $1 million property investment is covered for chump change. Or we have equipment, and I'll just kind of run through some of the different coverages, but we have equipment breakdown. So if the equipment breaks down and it affects your growing and it affects your crop, and then there's a loss of income, that's insured. I mean, there's so many different scenarios on how to protect yourself. But again, if you're up and running and growing and manufacturing and doing these things, and you've just gone out and bought a $250,000 piece of equipment for manufacturing, why in the world would you not want it insured? It's just like insuring your house or a motorhome or a boat or anything else. I mean, we have to think practically now. We're not underground anymore. It's not the Wild West anymore. It's a business. So it's insurance is a return on the investment. But again, I always say to everybody, let's give it a ballpark number. Let's build it into your budget so that you know how to operate and factor it in. So anyway, those, and can I just throw in a couple other little things to give people to think about?
Absolutely.
One of the other things too that I like to bring up, especially in California, and I'm not sure how it's going to affect other states, but again, being an employer and being prudent about things, is in California now, you're going to start seeing, and I get these calls all the time too, what is this labor peace agreement?
Oh, yes.
What is this labor peace agreement that I'm supposed to sign? Well, we've been doing these boot camps with with EDD and the state and OSHA and the Department of Agriculture. And what those labor peace agreements are is when people sign off on those, what they're agreeing to do is they are agreeing to allow unions to come onto your premises when you hit a certain threshold of employees. Well, whether you're union or not non-union, the point is, if you're opposed to that, and just, and I'm not trying to get off on a political note, but when you go union, it's extremely expensive and it's a whole nother world that, is difficult to wrap your arms around with. But if you, from the beginning, from the onset, if you treat your employees the right way, if they're real employees, you've got work comp, you've got a nice environment, and you maybe offer them some kind of health insurance benefits.
Don't give them a reason to unionize.
Don't give them a reason. And again, I don't want to offend anybody here or, get political or anything, but from a business, this is purely a business point of view. If you're a startup, why create more angst or more expense when on the onset you can be proactive and taking care of people? Just, these are all little things to think about. Again, when putting your business plan together and or you're up and running and you're finally going to pull the trigger and you're going to do things the right way, and you're going to insure your vehicles and just be safe. That's my thing. And there's so many different lines of insurance, but again, it's affordable, it's a necessary evil. But what I'm trying to do and what my group is trying to do is take the mystery out of it, take the scare tactics out of it, take the scammy, sleazy, slimy part out of it, and just do the right thing.
That's awesome, Renie. It's very enlightening. I mean, we could probably talk for insurance for several hours because there are so many different ways to insure yourself. There's
a million different ways to insure it, but this is just to kind of touch on it and know that, we all have exposure. Even when you bring in investors, there's exposure. So you can insure your investors to make sure that they're protected. But again, it's worth the exploration. I mean, you've got a budget anyway. You've got to run a business. So, run it the right way, or let's, work, that's what our group is all about, is resources, right? For everybody to work together and help each other.
Speaking of, Jamie, do we have any questions from the group?
Actually, we do. Kelly has asked, she said, I was going to say, while I understand the need for insurance, being that this industry is still federally illegal, are there any hard requirements for the insurance companies to stand by their coverage?
Oh, good question.
Well, sure. It's a contract. So if when you're insured, you exchange a document. I mean, it's a contract. It's a contract between two parties. So the language is there. The language is there. And if they fail to uphold the language in their document, then it's going to result in, state fines. And again, it's important to remember this isn't a federal issue. Remember, we talked about that at the very beginning. So this is state to state. So every carrier is responsible to the state Department of Insurance, no matter what state you're in. So, that's their standards. So if a carrier is coming in, misrepresenting and doing all that stuff, you've got the Department of Insurance all over them. So, but again, that's why it's so important for people to realize that it must be a cannabis policy. But on the flip side of that, typically, if you're underwriting a business and the underwriter starts asking you questions, a lot of them will say, we don't do cannabis. So we're out, so you shouldn't anymore get caught up in that because there's too many carriers that will do it. And again, it's incredibly important to know who you're dealing with. Is it an insurance agent that knows the business?
How do you vet an insurance agent?
Well, I personally, if it was me, I mean, I'd say, what do you know about WEiC? What do you know about this business? Have you been around it? What's your experience with it? Who are some of your clients? Who are some of your customers? I mean, what do you know? And if they go, well, we don't really know. Well, because you get a lot of people like that going, oh, well, maybe I should get into that. Well, okay, but if you don't know what the difference is between an outdoor grow, an indoor grow, a greenhouse grow, a seed, a clone, harvested, any, just the language altogether, manufacturing, closed loop, just all the jargon altogether, you're in trouble. I would just say, find somebody else.
Okay, I've got two questions for you. One is, what about deductibles? What are we looking at? I mean, we're talking about, a $3,500 policy, but does that also mean that I've got a $20,000 deductible?
No, usually business deductibles, $1,000, $1,500. Deductibles aren't huge. What? Deductibles in commercial insurance aren't like health insurance deductibles. It's not even the same animal.
Okay. Second question is, what about companies like mine and Jamie's? We don't touch the plant yet. She doesn't have her dispensary yet, but in what we're doing right now, we don't touch the plant. We advise, we work around. What about a company like ours? And then what about a company that's a different type of ancillary company? Something I've come across and I'm not really sure about is somebody who does demos, right? So in the traditional world, when it comes to products, there are people who will go out and demo products for you, right? And then you have to have certain types of insurance, make sure they're insured. What kind of insurance do you need if you're not necessarily touching the plant, but you kind of are touching the plant? So tell me those two scenarios.
We actually have a category for hospitality, which is parties, demos, dinner parties.
Yes, that all falls under.
Private parties, all that kind of stuff. So we actually do have coverage for all the demos and all that kind of stuff. In terms of like this, Caden Academy and all that kind of stuff, your standard policy, your subject matter just happens to be cannabis, but it's not any kind of coverage. I'll give you another one, you guys. Cyber. That's a big up and comer as well. At first, none of the carriers wanted to touch cyber, and people go, well, what do you need cyber coverage for? If you're a dispensary and you're dealing in any way, shape, or form, giving anybody an opportunity, let's say California right now, medically, and whether you're a dispensary or delivery, and you're taking somebody's information that's confidential and it gets hacked, and you have all kinds of exposure, not to mention credit cards, you're cooked as well. So again, there's cyber coverage. You know what? Here's the cool thing. More than likely, we can find you some kind of coverage that's related to cannabis. Even a year ago, it would be, calling carriers and, wheeling and dealing and this and that. But the carriers now are starting to call people, starting to call me or starting to call others saying, hey, we've just added this. We've just added.
So now there's more options as well.
Yeah. And we've just added this category. And, I just wrote a policy, I don't know, a month ago. And then they called me back and said, are you sure you don't want crop coverage, stock coverage? Are you sure you don't want different things? Another question I get asked is like with transportation. Well, what if it gets seized? Okay, that's not covered. Seizures aren't covered. But really, that's not going to happen from, you're not transporting out of the state. So in California, again, it will be legal. So,
like seized by the police, you mean? Like, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, what if like a secure transporter gets hijacked or, something like that and the product in there?
It's theft. Okay. So if you have cargo coverage, it's covered. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, it's awesome. If those fires, if they had been indoor grows, if they had been already bucked and trimmed and processed and everything, and they had insured their stock, they would have been covered. Property, had they had property coverage on the and again, there's so many scenarios. So I don't want to, like I said, I just did disclaimer here is just, this is a thumbnail on everything, but the good news is it's all doable. So I bet after the fires, and Kara, I think maybe we even talked about this, but I bet I saw 4 or 5 different times. I thought he even had an article sitting on my desk that said there's absolutely no coverage for the cannabis business. Well,
yeah, I read that too.
Yeah, there is, yes, there is, and we're all doing it. So there's a handful of us out there, and I'm sure, more people start getting into it. But the most important thing is just educate yourselves. I'm always happy to be a resource. It's no skin off mine. I would rather spend half a day making sure somebody's squared away than somebody not asking the question. I mean, I would be sick if somebody got into something and they weren't protected and lost something or theft or whatever. Anyway.
So when I decide I need insurance and I come to you, what you do with me is you do a full analysis of my entire business and say, here are all the different ways that you're at risk, and here's all the different ways that we can protect you. And then you put a package together. Well,
so what happens, so we're talking cannabis wise, our application is, again, it's not like auto insurance or health, it's pretty detailed. And, a lot of times people, I think, get kind of irritated, but it's only to help that person. The more information we have, the better we can underwrite it, the better we can solve a problem, the better, more competitive coverage. I have a client in Fort Collins that is opening up a dispensary and a grow and doing some manufacturing. But the more we were digging in, we realized, well, he's got to have this coverage, but his building's going to be vacant for a while. There's going to be some vacancy. And so we were able to go back to the carriers and go, look, he's going to be vacant. Again, every scenario is unique. We were able to, drive down the premium and just do certain things. So, it's a tiny bit of legwork for the bigger picture. And then, it
reminds me when we were talking with our legal team about, lawyers are something that traditionally have kind of a bad rap.
Yeah.
And it's the same with insurance, but in this industry, you've got to have a team of lawyers. You have to have a whole team of people that can really help you protect yourself. And then the next step with that is to make sure that you're really insured and working with an insurance agent who also becomes a part of your team, it sounds like. It isn't just somebody you call up and say, hey, I need this, file this, here, I'll send you my check. Like, you need somebody to come in and work with you and maybe even look at every quarter, every 6 months, review what you have.
We are part of your team, and that's the best way to do it. My partners, 2 of them are attorneys. They've got a cannabis practice over here, but so I can reach over to them anytime I need to ask a question or if there's any concern, or we're looking at line items. But that's what you have to look at. You need your legal team, you need your insurance, your risk management, and I don't know if you've done it yet, but you need a great accounting team. That's going to be that's a whole different animal.
Yes, and it's amazing how they're all intertwined and interconnected with each other.
Like, we need to know real numbers so that they, because again, you've got to base your premium on something. So it's either on your payroll, your sales, or whatever. And we don't want numbers that are overinflated. We don't want underinflated. We don't want a liability at the end. I mean, there's just a whole number of things. So, hopefully I've given just some little pointers to think about, or if nothing else, an extension to our group to say, hey, let me know if I can help you in any way, shape, or form, or anything you need.
Well, it has been very enlightening for me. How about you, Jamie?
Very, very, because I mean, like the state of Michigan just like 3 weeks ago put out their memo saying that they were going to require insurance on licensed facilities. And so this is a hot topic here. People are, and there's not a whole lot of insurance companies in here right now marketing themselves to our industry. So people are like, where do I start? Where do I get this information?
Well, and one more thing I want to throw out there to everybody too. And again, there's so many different categories, but the big one that really concerns me a lot too are these deliveries. So you've got all these little deliveries running around driving. Driving. And that's the $1 million question. Are they your employees? I doubt it. They probably have them listed as 1099s. What happens if there's a car accident?
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody needs to understand the string of liability. And I mean, it just, I just see it go, okay, if you just spend 30 minutes and at least you know your options, because it's going to happen. Unfortunately, there's always going to be a fender bender. There's always going to be somebody that's going to slip and fall walking in. And what are they going to do? They think it's cannabis. So, they just assume everybody in the cannabis business is just rolling in it and, sleeping with gold bars and stacks of cash and all that good stuff. And
right targets.
Targets. And we don't want to give anybody the opportunities. So, educate, protect, and help each other, right?
Absolutely.
And do we have any more questions?
Yeah, I do have a couple. One of them, Adrienne asked, can greenhouses be covered for natural disasters? That's a great question.
No.
No? Oh, no. So like a hailstorm or something?
No, it's going to be there. No. Now, they might start changing things, but I haven't seen it yet. I mean,
so I wonder if that's where that information about the fact you can't insure your crop comes from, because a lot of growers out here are greenhouse growers.
Right. But you have to understand, you can insure your crop if it's indoor, if it's greenhouse, but there's different levels of how you can insure it. You can insure your seed, your seedlings, your clones, your when you're hanging, once it's been trimmed, once it's been packaged. I mean, there's all kinds of different variables. Again, not all the carriers will do it, but you can start wheeling and dealing. And there's actually a kind of a commodity. There's an exchange where there's kind of a going rate on different things. I will tell you, there's no outdoor grow. No, nothing outdoors will be covered, but so I guess the question on the greenhouse, maybe to clarify that a little bit better from it, like if it's a greenhouse grow, if it's a fire, it's been scheduled, potentially, yeah, it's covered.
I live in West Michigan, so we are right on the lake shore of Lake Michigan, and a lot of storms blow across the lake and they hit the shore, and there are a ton of greenhouses all along the lake shore. And so I can imagine that being a legitimate concern with some of the wind.
Again, okay, I guess to drill down a little bit more would be, let's talk about the greenhouse. Let's talk about the structure. Let's talk about what kind of coverage do we want to do? You know what I mean? So in a broad stroke, but as you start talking about the coverages for fun, I'll send you can look at the application. You'll laugh. You're going to go, oh my gosh. Other things to think about, like with your dispensaries and stuff with carriers, they want to know about security cameras, your safes, how they're bolted in, doors, thickness, sprinkler systems. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So yeah, if there's a will, there's a way we can get it insured. That, like I said, the big bummer one is the outdoor grows. You can't cover those, but a lot of those growers that lost their crops already had harvested. That was a big part of that too. So they already harvested, and that crop that had been harvested could have been insured.
And then I have one other question from Kelly again. It says, are there any insurance topics that should be hashed out or discussed with legislatures in the states that are currently standing up for their programs? For instance, lessons learned or best practices to ensure that cannabis business and entrepreneurs don't get the short end of the stick when pioneering the industry in their respective states.
Good questions, Kelly. Thank you.
Wow, that is an awesome question. I will tell you, like the state of California, we're hashing it out. There's the Department of Insurance. They're awesome. I mean, they want feedback. They want to talk about different things. Again, it's more of, I don't want to portray, I feel like a lot of people think these carriers are just going to try to, screw the industry. And that's not what they do. I mean, when you've got a best rated, A+ rated carrier, they're not in the business to screw people. I mean, they're in the business to make money, obviously, and insure risks and make good decisions. So when you've got big hitters in it, like Berkshire Hathaway, like Hanover, those are big guys. Those are big names. So, they're, of course, they can't even, to be doing business in particular, to be admitted into states, that's the key. And the coverage is coverage, if that makes sense. I mean, no matter what the business is, whether you're in the cannabis business, the retail business, you own a bar or a carpet cleaning service. I mean, coverages are coverages. So I think I'm getting way off this question that she was asking if things should be hashed out, but I think they've done a good job hashing them out. I mean, I think we know from just a business sense what every business model should have. Other little side notes too on coverage. If you're in Florida, they have to bond the dispensaries. And I'm not sure of all the ins and outs. The last bit of language that I saw was some crazy number, like a $5 million financial bond. So there's bonding issues too. That's a whole different subject.
So yes, Kelly, go and fight your local.
I just got off on a time. I don't think I answered her question the right way.
That's okay. Let's just say yes. Go participate in legislation in your state, especially when it comes to insurance, because this is a really good point. Some states are going to create other barriers where you have to be bonded or other stipulations about what qualifies for being insured. So yeah, it's really important that we participate.
Be involved. And again, it goes back to the activism part of it.
Yeah. And in Michigan, they made that as a recommendation. The insurance thing that they announced was just a recommendation by the board. It's nothing set in stone. So right now, people in Michigan can go and express their concerns and give feedback on that and change it. And that's something when we're seeking licensing in our state, we got to be very involved in that whole regulatory process in helping create those rules, because they listen to us. And when you show up at these meetings and you talk and express those concerns, it really goes a long way.
And again, going back to all of that, so many of it cross references. So like when you're talking about work comp, so work comp just goes, into, that's a standard law of being an employer in the state of California, no matter what you're into. As far as the general liability and the product liability, and again, it's all a moving part. If I was, again, this is how a retailer is protecting themselves, but a dispensary or like the MGM Grand, that's a perfect example. They made it a requirement to have product liability. So again, it's going to be a moving part, but work comp is a given. Most general liability is going to be a given. If you're leasing equipment and have heavy equipment and that kind of stuff, that leasing company is going to want coverages. So it just goes on and on and on and on and on.
And we have barely touched on it, but I hope that we have
got something out of this. I just
some good questions.
Away.
And now your information's been so useful, Renie, and I think based on the questions that we've had today, that there are a lot of women that have some very basic questions about insurance, because it's, as you said, there's just this blanket misunderstanding that you can't insure anything in cannabis. So the questions kind of stop there. And I think opening up this dialogue, letting people know is really important. And it's an important thing to keep ourselves covered. I mean, my husband fights me all the time on the amount of insurance I like to carry, but there's a reason for it, because when disaster happens, you don't get your entire life taken down with it. And that is
And there's a million people out there, my brother-in-law is Norwegian and he doesn't believe in it. Well, okay, I get that. But there's certain instances where you have to have it. You go buy a car, you have to have auto insurance. I mean, so just, be smart, protect yourselves, I'm always open. My partner, I mean, we are here to help and serve and continue everybody's, growth in a positive manner.
And we'll put Renie's contact information in the comments below. So if you do want to reach out to her, you'll be able to reach her pretty easily. Thank you so much, Renie.
Thank you guys. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. And thank you, ladies, for joining us today on Mentor Monday. We're not going to have a Founder Friday this Friday, and next week we are at MJ Biz. So stay tuned, because Jamie and I are going to be doing some Facebook Live broadcasts all week from MJ Biz. We're going to be meeting members of the group face to face. We'll be probably doing some interviews with more really interesting people with different perspectives to share with us about things we may not necessarily know about, like Renie has done today. You can buy you can buy insurance for cannabis. And this is really, really critical, ladies, to understand. We want you to succeed, and part of that is protecting and insuring your assets. All right, I think that's it for us today. Jamie, do you have anything else you want to add?
I think that will do it. See you next week.
Have a good
See you next week at MJ Biz. Thank you again, Renie. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.